Have you ever just stopped and asked yourself what the point of it all is? Why do we do the things we do? Why do we throw our time and energy into so many pursuits which seem so insignificant when compared to the grand scheme of life, the universe, and everything? Everything goes round in circles. We are born, we grow up, we work, we grow old, we die. And so have all the generations before us, and so will all the generations that come after us. As it has been, so will it be always. So what is the point of it all? And this circular existence is true for the rich and the poor, the foolish and the wise, the righteous and the wicked, the Democrat and the Republican, the Remainer and the Brexiteer. And so much of it seems so random, unfair. One person succeeds where another fails. Chance seems to govern our fate. And if you have pondered these things, then you are not alone. Throughout history, people have wondered about what the point of it all was. Authors, philosophers, poets. And so has one of the most remarkable and perhaps unexpected books in the Bible, from which comes this week's Stonking Bible passage. Most of the Bible tells us the story of how God has been at work through human history, calling human beings, the beloved crown of his creation, back to himself. It is a narrative of hope, of purpose, a story of the God who is determined to save his people no matter what the cost, no matter how many times his love is rejected and spurned. But the book of Ecclesiastes is different, very different. Along with Proverbs and Jobs, it makes up a part of the Old Testament often referred to as wisdom literature. But the wisdom that Ecclesiastes has to offer appears to be rather uncomfortable and bleak. It asks us in no uncertain terms, what is the point of it all? There are two voices that we hear from in Ecclesiastes. First you have the editor, the person who kind of puts the book together and provides the foreword and afterword. More on them later on. And then you have the second character, Kohelet, a title which could be translated as preacher or more likely teacher. And it's his thinking which makes up the vast majority of the book. And it's not particularly comforting stuff. Meaningless, meaningless. Everything is meaningless. Or vanity of vanities. All is vanity, he begins. Or at least he does in many of our English translations. What he actually says is vapour or breath. Everything is like mere vapour. As autumn begins to give way to winter, you may have been able to see your breath leave your mouth on a cold, clear morning. The cloud of vapour that leaves your mouth on a crisp day looks solid, substantial even, but if you try and grasp hold of it, it will simply slip through your fingers. Life, says Kohelet, is like that. It is enigmatic. It does not always add up. Merest breath, says Kohelet. Merest breath, all is breath. What gain is there for man in all his toil, that he toils under the sun? A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth endures forever. All things are weary. A person cannot speak, the eye is not sated with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. That which is that which will be, and that which was done is that which will be done is that which will be done. There is nothing new under the sun. So what are we to make of all this? Why is this strange book in the Bible? Well, part of the point of it, part of the reason that it's there, is for us to just sit with it and to allow it to ask searching questions of us. Because Ecclesiastes does have questions for us. It reminds us that life is elusive, fragile. We may convince ourselves that we have control of our fate, but the reality of existence seems to be that just when we think that our way of life is safe and settled, then along comes a pandemic, or an illness, or a bankruptcy, or a tragedy. Vapour, vapour, all is vapour. It may look solid, but it slips through your fingers. Trying to remain in control of every aspect of our lives is like attempting to herd the wind, or building cloud castles on a windy day. And this is exactly what the back and forth, the often paradoxical content of Ecclesiastes speaks into. It reminds us to slow down, to enjoy life. Don't waste it. Appreciate the gifts of sight and sound and taste and smell and touch while they're available to you. But be aware. Even the greatest feasts, pleasures, and aesthetics fail to make sense of our existence. They are good, but they don't offer us ultimate meaning. Which brings us back to that other voice that we hear in the book. The editor who introduces the content and closes it with an afterword. He speaks in his conclusion to chapter 12 at the end of the book about how the words of Kohelet are like nails driven in. In other words, they're there to make a point, to penetrate through the surface of our everyday. Or, he says, they're like a shepherd's goad, the pointy bit on the bottom of a shepherd's staff, which is used to give a sheep an uncomfortable prod when it needs to be moved in a different direction. These words of Kohelet are there to wake us up, so let him challenge your false hopes, the things that you put your trust in. Kohelet deconstructs the things that we all too easily and often rely on. The editor then concludes the book thus. Now all has been heard. Here is the conclusion to the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it is good or evil. We are not meant to remain in this place of vapour, breath, and everything being utterly enigmatic and unknowable. But we do need to hear these words to wake us from a slumber which sees us pass through our 80 years and 10 on earth without valuing what really matters and living in a meaningful way. Because it turns out life does ultimately have meaning. And while all too often our existence feels like vapour, something which seems solid but slips through the fingers, we can hold on to the solid reality and truth that 2,000 years ago, hundreds of years after Koheleth penned his questioning words, God himself came to be in our midst, to defeat death itself, to answer so many of the questions about the pointlessness of existence. And a bit later in the service, Rich is going to lead us in the act of communion where we pause together and remember through some bread and some wine that Jesus Christ came to defeat death, to save us, and to show his love for us. Know you are loved. However you feel, whatever your questions, that's okay. Seek God this day.